Hey, welcome back to the Story of Liberty with Kirk Cameron, Dr. Marshall Foster, and producer Dwayne Barnhart of the upcoming film called Monumental. And we were talking about that. Dwayne, when we were up there, Kirk, one of the things that really got my attention, of course, was the Statue of Faith. And that Hammett Billings designed this monument, of course, actually, 150 years ago. And
Right.
one of the main things that really spoke to me was that when I asked Paul Jaley why she was pointing to heaven, and he pointed out something I didn't think about, and he said, obviously to acknowledge God, but that also that there was only one mediator between God and man, Christ, and that was the major tenet of their faith, defined also that a reformer believed in the priesthood of all believers, and that there was no need to pray through a bishop or a priest in order to get to God, that one would have, a direct relationship with God through Christ. And that's why she was pointing to heaven, and it was a truth that defined this Reformation. Of course, that caused much controversy in the split of the church. But, boy, like you said, Kirk, to me, it is the greatest monument I've ever seen anywhere. And how blatantly Christian it is, and it shows the pilgrim belief that there is only one way to the Father in heaven, and that is through Jesus Christ. And I just love being up there, and I look forward to going back up there with you guys. I guess we're planning on going up again, right, Dwayne?
The good news is it's there for all of us to see. I would encourage everybody, every listener that's on the line today, just to make a trip, take your family, take your kids, go see the monuments. It's that important. In fact, Kirk is so excited and so wanting to live out the principles of that monument. He is focused on education right now, which is one of the sub-statues under monument, and he's no longer on the call with us, but taking his kids to school, and so he's living it out. The principle of Monumental is, starts around the dinner table with family, and as a man, he's now engaged with his kids.
Well, that's great. One of the other statues there, Morality, who I guess is the first seated figure, she's about 15 feet high, and she's looking heavenward, and where she gains all her source from God in the Bible. And she's also holding the Ten Commandments, which really caught my eye. And, of course, the first four have to do with our relationship with God, and the last six with man. And, Marshall, I remember you talking about that and made note of that it was the Pilgrim's desire, our founder's desire, to obey God's law, and to have a good relationship with Him. They had to do that.
Well, that's right. And the neat thing about the monument, and we want all of the people to look up monumental.com. By the way, they can follow the development of the movie by staying with us and being part of the email team as we spread this message all over the country over the next 6 months before the movie comes out. But the actual monument does share this incredible story, as I was saying earlier, that America is either going to have a revolution that's going to be a physical revolution or a physical civil war, or there can be a unifying voluntary factor that can save us from that revolution. What could it be? Well, this monument tells us what that is. It tells us that if we will all have faith individually, it's not something we can force on anybody. It's the fact that the American people have got to go back to the faith that built them. And that faith is in the God of the Bible and His Son, Jesus Christ. And the result of that faith is that God gives you a morality. You don't have a morality in yourself. We're born breaking the Ten Commandments because we're all sinners. But what the Statue of Morality points out is that the internal morality, which is what the lady seated there represents, is something that God produces in our hearts. And it's through the gospel that our hearts are changed, then we desire to obey the commandments. If you desire to obey the commandments on our own, without having the government or someone else to force us, then we don't need tyranny. But if you will not obey God and obey in a loving way, loving your neighbor as yourself, then what happens is the government steps in and it regulates your life. It takes over your life. It sets up not just 10 commandments, but thousands of regulations and rules that will control your life, just like Pharaoh and Caesar did in the ancient times. And that's what's happening to America today. Because we turn our back on the 10 commandments,
right,
we get 10,000 commandments from a false ruler. And so how do we avoid that? We all go back to personal faith in Christ, and we trust him for the power to do the right thing. Then from that develops the law system that is a biblical law system that we agree on voluntarily, which is, for example, just weights and measures. Right on the monument, it tells us what kind of money system we ought to have. You've got to have just weights and measures. That means you can't inflate the currency. You need to have a hard currency that does not change. If it changes, then the king can inflate the money anytime he wants to and put the people in bondage, which is exactly what's happening today. So following these biblical principles that are laid out here on the statute, and so much more as the Bible talks about, is going to lead the American people back to a time of blessing. Blessing comes through obedience, and obedience comes through faith. It's a simple message, but it is the answer for America's problem.
It's interesting, too, that the Statue of Morality that we're talking about at the Forefathers Monument in Plymouth, Massachusetts, was originally paid for by the state legislature of Massachusetts. And it was thought that the legislature and its public servants up there ought to be a clear example of morality and demonstrating leadership for the citizens of Massachusetts. And boy, how far have we drifted from that, right in that very state of Massachusetts? Need I mention any names? But boy, that's what we need to go back to, don't we?
Absolutely. In fact, that's one of the taglines for the film that we're kicking around right now. Is sometimes the only way forward is to go back, and the monument is a good example of that. We need to go back to the principles of the founding fathers, the original ideas that they had for the direction of our nation. We need to go back, just as you and Marshall had said.
Well, thank you, our guests, Kirk Cameron, Dr. Marshall Foster, and Dwayne Barnhart, the producer of Monumental. Thank you guys for joining me on the inaugural program, The Story of Liberty.
This is Planet Vero Radio on 1370 AM and 107.9 FM, produced in the Idea Garden Advertising Studios.